And tan.
I don't know if there's some background noise.
Not now, but.
I'm not sure why.
We're chattering.
Like radio almost. It's not at my house.
People are talking amongst themselves.
Blessing, are we ready? It's 7.
Yes, Blessing said we're ready.
I'm sorry, what was that? Blessing said he's ready?
Yep.
Yes, he's all set.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So it is 7 p.m. and I will call the meeting to order. This is the business meeting, the July business meeting of the Milford Board of Education. It's July 11th, 2022. If we could all please rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Ms. Griffin, can you please do a roll call attendance?
Yes. Catherine Ailing. Adam DeYoung.
Here.
Megan Doyle.
Here.
Andrew Fowler.
Here.
Tracy Irby.
Here.
Emily McDonough Souza.
Here.
Una Petrosky.
Here.
Betsy Ratner.
Here.
Cindy Wolf Boynton.
Here.
And Susan Glennon.
Here.
All board members present.
Okay. We have public comment next on the agenda. Ms. Petrosky, is there anyone in the audience for public comment?
No, there is not.
Okay, so we will dispense with the public comment statement and move on to the chair's report. Very briefly, I just want to remind everyone we're on our summer schedule. I hope that everybody has a good summer. We will not meet again until August 22nd, unless there's some emergency that comes up that we need to meet over. So the next business meeting will be August 22nd. Ms. Petrosky, can you let me know if there's any liaison reports from anyone?
Yes, we do have one from Ms. Boynton.
Mr. Boynton?
Yes. So I have a report on permanent schools. So we met last week and there is a lot that's going on, including several challenges related to the school building projects that we have in the works. So even though the estimate on Pumpkin Delight renovations was done just a few months ago and accurate at that time, the construction bids we received on the project show that we will likely need $2 million more than the $12 million that the city has bonded. As a first step in that, Mr. Riccitelli and Permanent Schools Chair Matt Woods are going to be getting together with Mayor Blake to discuss. And after that happens, Permanent Schools will schedule a meeting so we can make a decision on what needed actions need to be done as soon as possible. So ideally, the project can go on as planned with construction starting at the end of next school year. We have similar issues going on related to the supply chain that are also going to be affecting renovations done at Live Oaks and Calf Pen. The work is being done this summer as planned, but because of supply chain issues, we're not going to have the new doors or windows in on time to have them be part of this building. So when students and faculty go back to school in the fall, they are going to be seeing a building that has been renovated, but that is using the old doors and windows, which everyone involved has determined is safe and physically sound. And then hopefully over either Thanksgiving or Christmas break, they will be able to put in the new windows and doors, so the project will be finished. Similarly, the roofing project, partial roofing project at Foreign High School, which is supposed to begin next year, is facing some potential issues, also related to supply chain and inflation. It's a little early now, I think, and maybe Mr. Richatelli, you will concur or say no. It's a little early to get too anxious about it, but at the moment, estimates are that if we were to go ahead with that project today, that we would be a little bit more than $884,000 over what's been bonded. We're hoping, however, that when the project is put out to bid for construction companies, that's going to happen in January. We're hoping that by then, costs will have gone down a bit, and it is a competitive time for roofing companies. So hopefully an improvement with the inflation and a desire for the project will help that not really be an issue. Thank you.
Ms. Wolf-Boyton, just to clarify, the windows and the doors, those are in the hardened vestibules for those two schools, right?
Yes.
Okay, are there any other liaison reports this evening?
No.
Okay, seeing none, we can move on to Dr. Kutaya's superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Glennon, thank you. Wait, I think I have too many microphones on. Okay, thank you, Ms. Glennon, thank you, members of the Board of Education, for your time this evening. I'm working with two devices, so I am just trying to modify the volume. Can you guys hear me well or no? Any feedback?
Yes.
A little bit.
Little echo.
Yep.
Bad though.
Little echo.
That's
I'm gonna turn this off while we are speaking. Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. Sorry about that. So it is my pleasure to share with you the year in review. Annually, this time of year, we are excited to share with the public, with the Board of Education, the many accomplishments of the school year, and in particular, we'll be focusing on the 21-22 school year. Let me bring up slides and share that with you. Your screen. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So this first screen, I just want the board to take a moment to really consume this the first slide of our presentation this evening, because it really is about the visual that represents what we've experienced this school year. And we've chosen to entitle this presentation A Year in Transitions because it has been just that, a year of lots of decisions that we've had to make. Albeit right now we're all comfortable, we're not wearing masks, we believe the pandemic is behind us in many ways. But actually, I'd like to remind the board and the public that a year ago, we were still undecided how we would return to school. We were just completing a school year where we had come back full-time, still wearing masks, still socially distanced, for a few weeks at least. And we were still pending guidance for how to start a school year. So if you'll remember, there were many transitions right out of the gate, starting on July 1st. This picture is a photo of a shot of our students at Foreign. And you'll see that one student has her mask on fully, and another student has her mask on partially. And not to cite any wrongdoings here, but basically, visually, that represents our school year. That we went from a fully masked, fully socially distanced environment, transitioning to what many would call a more quote-unquote normal school setting. So this evening, categorically, we're gonna work through some of the highlights of the school year, and I hope that you will find that despite the challenges of pandemic, we were able to accomplish great things for students, particularly in the area of teaching and learning and taking care of our facilities and communicating and engaging our families. So I'll take you back a full year, and I'll also remind our public and the board, not that you need any reminding, that of the scope of work that exists in Milford Public Schools. Facility-wise, we have 1.1 million square feet of building space. So this is not just like taking care of your home of 2,200 square feet or so. It is much larger in scope. We take care of 179 acres of grounds, and we have 485 classrooms that need to be cleaned and sanitized and taken care of and made ready for the first day of school, which started on September 1st. And at this time, if I haven't done so enough, I want to just thank our facilities and maintenance, our custodial crew, for doing an incredible job in many uncertain times, getting our classrooms ready safely and very clean for our students to return to, and staff. Over the summer of 2021, we completed 300 building and facility projects, and that included, but was not limited to, the mitigation requirements that existed back last summer. So on top of making sure that we could come back in a socially distanced manner, our maintenance facilities department engaged in regular facility upgrades and maintenance as well. So it wasn't just pandemic related. And if you recall, folks, if a pandemic wasn't enough to handle, we also got hit hard on the second day of school by Hurricane Ida, if you remember. It actually shut Harborside down for only 24 hours, while Harborside took the hardest hit. A few of our other schools were also hit, and there was some damage, but Harborside, if you recall, we had to shut school down, and our crew went in immediately. Here are some pictures of the damage that it made, that was made based on the flooding that came in from the city side, downtown city side, and we had to shut the basement down for much of the school year. So 21-22 began, if you recall, 100% in person, full day, full week, and mask required. That was a big accomplishment. So I don't want to diminish now that we're not masked and we're basically back to normal. If you remember at the beginning of the school year, there were many students and families worried about returning. But we came 100% full-time, mask required, still socially distanced. On September 1st, our student enrollment was 5,373 students. We transport about 3,800 of those students using 62 buses, 105 bus runs, and 973 bus stops. I always love using those statistics because that's a lot of bus stops to ensure that students make it to school and make it home safely. We have sung praises of our food service department for such a long time, particularly on how they have met basic needs of families throughout the pandemic. But on a regular basis, if you recall, we serve almost 200,000 breakfasts every year, and we have served 566,000 lunches. And all of those were served free of charge, if you recall, based on federal grant that we received for the 21-22 school year. This year we welcome new administrators to the team. Specifically, we were able to welcome 6 new administrators added to their position or to the school district. You'll see those represented here. And this is one of the largest numbers that we can recall in Milford history for a long time. We also onboarded 79 new teachers throughout the 21-22 school year. So a big thank you to our HR department for the entire gamut of recruiting and hiring and onboarding 79 new teachers. Taking us back a year, we, as I have already mentioned, had to engage in transitioning back to school. So if you'll recall, there's a picture of our back to school manual as required by the State Department to publish for families. That included a constant monitoring of case rates, sharing that information with families every day, communicating to the families where we made vaccination clinics available in our schools for all of our students. We even provided at-home test kits We made sure that our families and our students, particularly had opportunities to be tested at school, and that was on a voluntary basis, of course. And we made sure that vaccination clinics occurred at all our schools. We even brought the vaccination clinics to our elementary schools when that age group was had access to the vaccine. So we feel like we really allowed our families to have an ease and a security of access to mitigation strategies that help us make everyone much safer. So continuing on with our COVID response, we worked very, very closely with the Milford Health Department. And again, I believe that our success in Milford Public Schools in keeping everyone safe throughout this pandemic had a lot to do with our very strong partnership with the health department. So I want to publicly once again thank Deepa, Joseph, Dr. Carlson, our medical advisor, Joan Campbell, supervisor of nurses. Those individuals were very instrumental, along with the entire army of school nurses that helped our young families, and our young students every day. One thing we probably haven't talked a lot about in public is the Zonar badges that were administered to all of our students, but we had a very special monitoring system started in our school buses this year. This was something new in response to the pandemic. And as each child boarded and got off the bus, they would scan onto the bus so we could more easily contact trace our young people. That also gives us a record of attendance of our young people on the buses. So that was something that our Durham Bus Services partnered with us through Jim Riccitelli's office to ensure that that was put in place for this school year. If we start looking at communications, I believe that a key factor to our success in responding to the pandemic has been our strong communication with families in our community. And this is just a sampling of how that occurred throughout the pandemic. We have had a long-standing tradition in Milford Public Schools of strong, consistent communication with staff and students and families. And throughout the pandemic, that was strengthened, I believe. We made sure to communicate via letters from my office. We continued some throughout the school year, Milford Super News. We continued our weekly upcoming news and events every Friday. Those were sent home to families. Multiple Zoom meetings where we allowed families to log in webinar format, where Dr. Fettigan and I provided information on how we're coming back to school, continued newsletters and text messaging through our communication system. So communication remained strong throughout the school year, and not only did we continue our traditional forms, but we also added new ones. We added a new website, we partnered with a new provider, and it involved a complete rebuilding of the platform. So thanks to our bids department and communication department on building that together. We re-engineered our Twitter accounts. We brought in a new live feed. We re-engineered the Milford Public Schools app, which has started allowing us, allow families to opt into text messages for information, news, and emergency alerts. So while we have experienced strong communication with our families and community, we believe we've taken additional steps to continue to strengthen that. Internally, we also added a few new ones as far as enhancing our emergency management system. Alertus is a platform that we've brought in that allows new emergency messaging systems internally with our staff members, particularly those who lead our buildings. We have phase 1 of implementation on the way, and we're beginning phase 2 this coming summer. It allows us to, through one portal, push emergency notifications directly to our school buildings. And this would be in the form of some type of threat or danger to our schools. So the moment we have been waiting for over 2 years, on March 28th, we reopened our doors to our parent volunteers, visitors, community members, and we believe that that was something that we were all longing to get to. We enjoyed continuous two-way communication through that day, of course. So we provided surveys, back-to-school webinars, parent university continued throughout the year. I regularly met with our parent restart group. We met with PTOs and PTAs, particularly through PTA Council. And all of that actually provided us information to reopen, getting back to quote unquote normal on March 28th. So masks became optional at that point. Visitors were welcomed back into our system. We conducted softer openings, particularly at the elementary school, where we re-invited our families into events, some that existed outdoors, like that is depicted in one of these photos, and some that we started bringing families back into our buildings for events to engage with our young people. And I will tell you, everyone was happy about that. Not just moms and dads, but teachers and custodians and principals. It was a glorious week bringing our families back into our schools. So I hope the community knows that we were all super thrilled to get back to our school community feel. So we reintroduced some familiar events. These are just a couple of them. Flappy at Orchard Hills School started welcoming our young people and families back into buildings. We had student performances. Halloween parades came back. I think I heard a cheer throughout the community that day when we were bringing back Halloween parades. And career days were coming back to quote-unquote normal routines. And we started reintroducing familiar events like drama performances. Kindergarten orientation occurred inside of our building this year with young people and families who were coming to kindergarten for next year. And we even held some of our concerts in person indoors. We re-engaged in family picnics and PTA events, in-person math nights. April and May and June pretty much felt like the good old days with some of our events for students and families. So we were able to re-engage in many of the traditional community-based events in our schools and then introduce some new ones. For example, here, New People Empowering People, the PEP program launched in 2022. One of our schools, Foreign, made ceramic copies in service to Memorial Day. We even celebrated some in-person classes for families. Moving on to the category of technology, we actually replaced 1,500 Chromebooks this year. It's part of our refresh cycle, which we talked about for some board members who were with us way back when we first started administering Chromebooks to young people. If you remember that school year 2019, we started with grades 2 through 5 and grade 9. That was the very first rollout of Chromebooks in a one-to-one device program. So this is the year that we were in a regular cycle refreshing those. So this year, 1,500 students received new Chromebooks. We also provided teachers with new laptops that are much more powerful, allow them to access apps and software to do work. We've learned so much through the pandemic with technology and instruction. So we wanted teachers to have more powerful devices to do that, and so we re-administered those devices to our teachers. And we even went as far as to outfit our outdoor tents with Wi-Fi capability so that we can continue to do the outdoor learning environment and allow our teachers and students access to that. So we continued our priority of keeping kids healthy from the inside and out. So we engaged in the Wingman program. We've talked to the board about this a little bit, where our middle schoolers are continuing peer-to-peer work and encouragement and leadership building. And if you recall, we added school counselors at the elementary level and added an additional one at each middle school, giving us more resources to help our young people and families in need. We also engaged in some trauma training and threat assessment training, more related to not external dangers, but more trauma and threat as far as self-harm or any students in crisis. We engaged in a deep level of training with that this spring for our staff members. We also revised SEL lessons for PK5 morning meeting. Additionally, at 6-8, we mapped out some morning meeting lessons, and we reviewed and continue to review the high school advisory program. And internally, last summer when we onboarded all those counselors, we engaged in a social emotional learning summit where we talked a little bit about the role of the social worker, the school psychologist, the school counselor, We continue to do that work as we learn more about what their needs of our family and students are, and more about the roles of those three individuals, particularly at our schools. We can't do our work without our partners. Here are some of the partners that have been instrumental, already spoken about the health department. But I'll tell you, Griffin Health was a powerful partner this year in ensuring that we had access to vaccination clinics. And we're just at the ready to help us, even considering additional mitigating strategies moving forward. We work closely with Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA, particularly over the last 2 years, where we've provided after-school care by both of those organizations at our schools or at their places of business. We worked very closely with the library throughout all this, and Progressive Diagnostics actually is the organization that provided us with on-site testing for our students. We also brought back some good old favorites. We were glad to have J. Rose Smooth Jazz for Scholars concert, a fundraiser that benefits our music program. We engaged in the spelling bee again and our annual Respect Star celebration. So through our partnerships, we're also able to engage in some celebration of student work and achievement and some of the arts programs. We know that for the Board of Education, it was a year of transition also, going from Zoom meetings and complete Zoom meetings, then moving back to Jonathan Law High School in a socially distanced, masked environment, and then coming back home into the boardroom as we are this evening. So we know that for the board, it's been a transition year. Also saying goodbye to some board members, but also welcoming other new board members this year as we saw an election occur throughout this school year. This year, a big congratulations to the Board of Ed for completing the revision of 27 policies and updates, covering a wide range of topics. And in fact, we have 3 more. We're kicking off the new school year in great form, and we're starting with policy revision this evening. We also had successful adoption of the operating budget. The Board of Education was able to bring that to the Board of Finance and Board of Aldermen and successfully have that adopted. Additionally, we've worked with various grants, the CARES Act, ESSER 2, all of those are being implemented still in response to the needs of our students and staff and families due to the pandemic. So if that wasn't enough, we're also engaging in major building projects. So the hardened entryway work continues. We saw some of that work being completed this school year. As Ms. Wolf Boynton has already mentioned, the work of Pumpkin Delight is well on its way. The project got its green light. The board and the public have been engaged in architectural sketches and dreaming and planning for the students and staff of and families of Pumpkin Delight. That was well on its way this school year. And finally, after many years of dreaming of this, the planetarium has been fully renovated and operational. And stay tuned, folks, a ribbon cutting and open house will occur in the 22-23 school year. So we were able to bring some of our very own students to use the planetarium this year. And I'll tell you, it's getting rave reviews. So be on the lookout for this early fall of, we'll be opening it up to our community as well. So in the area of academics and performance, in some ways you would never know it was a pandemic because there were so many things that were accomplished in teaching and learning. And yes, that's right. HQI Live Season 2 did take place fully masked and socially distanced. We are so glad to bring our teachers back together with our students to continue our work with HQI. And we have, I know I'll include this in next year's presentation, but I have to talk about it. We have more than 100 participants signed up to start HQI Live this very Wednesday. So the numbers and the interest continue to grow. So this Wednesday we'll kick HQI Season 3 off with over 100 participants. So really excited to share more with that, the board and the public throughout the year. So grateful for this board's support on the entire notion of intentional play and executive function. And through your budget, as you know, we will be implementing this fully in our kindergarten rooms, but we did have a pilot occur this school year, and speaking of rave reviews, teachers and students alike are really engaging in this revitalized curriculum that brings us back to more developmentally appropriate instruction, where play is at the heart of learning, and we know that's just life, right? So glad that we'll be doing that with our kindergarten, pre-K kindergarten again. We expanded oral language into grade 3, and as you know, we'll be expanding PK 4 to 4th grade next school year. Academically at the high school, we had 167 students named AP scholars. It's a big number for our young people, and that was from the fall of 2021. There's a breakdown of scholars there. We had many with honors and with distinction, something that our community, our schools should be very, very proud of. We made Science Labs a reality finally. While they were launched in the 2021 school year, in most schools, if not all, we had to repurpose those teachers to help us reduce the number of children in the classroom due to social distancing. But 21-22, Science Labs were in full steam ahead. Kids, when you see a student walking by the STEM lab when you're in elementary school, I've seen this so many times, their walk slows down. Like they're slowing down, walking by, peeking in, and sort of like magnetically, they want to be drawn into the science lab. So it is definitely a favorite learning space for many young people. And we're just so excited that the board and our community supported full science labs in our elementary schools. I can't wait to talk to you about the scientists that we're graduating in a few years. And hopefully we'll get some stories of young scientists telling us that they fell in love with science back in elementary school. I can't wait for those first initial stories. Academically, we also made huge progress in the area of curriculum work. I have a couple slides on that. You'll see how much work has been done. We started the work of identifying what Milford measures look like, i.e. what does it look like to be successful in Milford Public Schools. That's where we started the work. We've also started the work of the Mastery-Based Diploma Assessment. We'll bring more to you and the public on this. And it's really aligning our state graduation requirements policy work with practice. That's the bottom line of that. But even much more so, we're going to be using the policy on that as a minimum standard because we're going to grow it much bigger to align with our work in HQI and Milford measures. And finally, we launched middle school schedule 1.0. We are revising it, and we'll be presenting a 2.0 to our families and students in the September. And you never know, we may need a 3.0 because what we're doing is allowing ourselves to be responsive to student and staff needs. And as we learn more about that, we'll continue to modify it so that there's more voice and choice available to middle school students. Our internships gained strength and popularity. We saw a huge interest of our high schoolers in the internships. I attended some of the presentations this spring and they were phenomenal. In fact, it's such a spark of interest that we have our admin team working on how to expand the intern opportunities for more students. We want to open those gateways so that more kids have the opportunity to select an internship as they enter into their more formative years in high school. But we've also started talking about how to open it up younger. So that's still in development phase, but we are happy to share that this year there was a very high interest in young people engaging in real world experience in our very own community and with our own business owners. So I want to thank all of our business owners for allowing our students into their work and giving them an experience to learn about maybe what they want to do with their lives. So I told you we did some heavy lifting in curriculum, and here is just the slide on STEM. If you want to take in this slide for a moment, I'm not going to read it to you, but you would never know this was a pandemic year based on just the curriculum work that was done by, led by administrators and teacher leaders, and done with teachers and by teachers. So you'll see all the STEM curriculum that has been rewritten. the long list of humanities as well. I'll give you a moment to read through that. You'll see the gamut from everywhere from kindergarten, preschool, to 12th grade. All curriculum work being done at all levels. And then finally, in the arts, we continue to revise curriculum there in all areas. Art, music, library, all continued. So as the year was winding down, we engaged in some of our more typical celebrations. Here you'll see us celebrating our Teacher of the Year, Para of the Year, Parent of the Year. We're able to have the end of year celebration of that with our board members, so thank you for that. We're also able to do some fun student activities. Remember the middle school track meet? Well, that continued, and well, I don't know, I think Mr. Gottlieb is still talking about the win. He brings it up still occasionally, so congratulations, Harborside. And congratulations goes to the entire class of 2022. You'll see some of our middle school moving up ceremonies here in person with their families present. And then we held only 3 graduation ceremonies. Remember the days when we were holding like 11 of them because of the pandemic. So we were just happy to celebrate our young people together with their families on the field and in the stands. And just a little preview of what's coming up. I've already mentioned HQI Season 3. We're already running fast this summer. It just feels like there wasn't really any downtime in between 21-22 and 22-23. So we're already breaking ground with Pumpkin Delight. We have summer school launching, has already launched, sorry. Pat Bradbury's team are already engaging in grounds and building projects, curriculum work. School year never really stops for the adults in the system. So we're continuing throughout the summer to do the great work so that our presentation next year is just as hearty. And first day of school is August 31st, 2022. And I'm happy to take questions from the board. I hope you have found that we've really continued to implement the 4 goals that the board adopted last May. You'll see, I believe you will see that those, the work from this school year has really aligned with the 4 goals that are a visional learner. And I hope that you see that we've really adhered to the Board of Ed commitments that were adopted last May. You see those integrated all throughout the work and the priorities of our school district. I'm happy to take any questions by board members.
Thank you, Dr. Kutaya. Ms. Petrosky, can you facilitate any questions that board members might have, please?
Any questions, board members?
Not a question, but a comment.
Ms. Ratner?
Thank you, Ms. Petrosky. It's more of a comment on the goals and commitments. 100-fold, it's very exciting that we did so well in light of what the year was offering us individually in between the months. Terrific. I'm excited. Great year.
Thank you, Ms. Ratner.
Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you, Ms. Petrosky. Just a quick question, Dr. Kutaya, if you have any update on whether the funding for the meal program will be renewed in the 22-23 school year?
I have not heard of an update on that. We did not receive anything from the government that will be continued, but I think Mr. Riccitelli is there to your right.
I am, yes. Thank you, Dr. Kutaya. And Mrs. Glennon, through you to Mr. DeYoung. Right now, it looks like we will not be receiving. There will be, Congress passed a bill which allows for additional funding, but not enough for free lunches for everybody, free breakfast and lunch. So there will be additional, I think it's about 40 cents a meal, which will help with defraying the cost of any increases that we have to pass on to families who are paying families. But no free breakfast and free lunch this year. We don't see any path for that to happen this year.
So an additional 40 cents on top of what we're already reimbursed?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so, yeah,
Yes.
it's not nothing.
No, it's not nothing, it's for sure.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none? Ms. Glennon, did you want to move on?
Thanks. Dr. Kutaya, I just wanted to ask, will the testing, the voluntary testing program continue into next year, as far as you know?
We're not really sure what September brings. That sounds like last year's answer, right?
That's
So
okay.
we're waiting on some guidance. And if you read the news today, things don't look promising as far as another strand. So I'm hoping to know more this time in about a month. So.
Thank you.
I do have a question.
All right, if there are no more questions about the year in review presentation, we can move on to board policies.
Excuse me,
Dr.
Ms.
Kutaya?
Thank you, Ms. Glennon.
Excuse me, I'm
So
sorry,
when
can I interrupt
have
for a
the
moment,
board bring up
please?
the policies? This is the first read. At least
Excuse
two out of
me?
three of the policies are a little
Kutaya?
bit ahead
Dr.
of it.
Kutaya?
So I will admit that.
It's fine.
Dr. Kutaya, excuse me? We had
Yeah.
one last question from Ms. Doyle.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry, I could have asked it earlier. I was looking at the students transported daily to and from school, and it seems like about 1,500 students per day are driven or drive themselves to school. Is there anything that can be done to encourage more parents to put their kids on the buses? Because I've driven around in times and see the number of parents picking up their kids. Is that a pandemic issue, a pre-pandemic issue, a combination of things, a flow issue?
Sure. Dr. Katawa, you want me to take that?
Yeah, I think there are lots of parts to that, Jim, so why don't you start that off, and then if I have to add, I will.
Sure.
If you want to reference the board policy, though.
Yes, absolutely. The board policy obviously spells out which students are eligible for the buses and which ones are not. Of the ones that are eligible, ridership during the pandemic was extremely low. It got better last year when it was time to take the masks off. But we have seen a tremendous amount of more traffic around the schools. And we're hoping, I mean, we will do our best to make sure that families know that they're eligible for the buses. And even those that are not eligible, we have a way for non-eligible students to take the bus if there's room. So we will send things out throughout the summer and really try and bombard everybody once that last week comes with what buses, what routes are available to them and getting them on the buses. We really, we really wish that people would take advantage of the bus and not drive their students, but unfortunately that hasn't been the case, especially in the last 2 years.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll also have a transportation update in the fall that, so maybe Mr. Riccitelli can tweak the numbers a little bit and let us know if things have gotten any better
Sure, we'll be happy to.
in September.
Great, thank you.
Any other
Okay, now we
comments?
can go back to policies.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. If I can have board members please bring up policy 5141. This is now re-entitled Student Health Services. Prior to that, it was Health and Health Medical Records. So I want to start this category of policies off with a comment that these policies are highly, highly regulated. A lot of this language comes straight out of statute, and a lot of this is also dictated by some of the work out of the health department and our medical advisor. So please know that prior to putting these policies in front of the board, we had the director of medical, health director of Milford review and revise, the supervisor for nurses review and revise, our medical advisor review and revise, and our legal counsel, Ms. Carolyn Hugas, review and revise. So these three policies in particular have been through 4 sets of eyes by individuals that hold expertise and background, at least 3 out of 4 of them, in the medical field or policy around medical. And a lot of this comes out of statute. Just once again want to underscore that. So there may be fewer liberties for this board to modify the language, but of course any thoughts or considerations of modification or language, we would have to bring back to the health department, medical advisor, supervisor of nursing, and legal counsel. We will have a representative from the health department and legal counsel at our August 22nd meeting, at which time I'm assuming this board would have had some time to consume the content of these policies, and we would have those individuals present to help answer those questions. Until then, let me go over the policy changes, okay? So if you go to 5141, you'll note that the first set of changes occur under the title of health records. In particular, the cumulative health record is something that has been part of procedures in life of schooling for as long as I can remember. And particularly this portion identifies what parts of the record exist, how it should be handled, and in particular that health records are covered by FERPA and are exempt from HIPAA. And that is language that is a rule not set by us. And that's important in our procedures and processes in school on how we handle some of those records based on requests from families and potential partners in the educational field. If you move on to the category of health assessments, vaccinations, immunizations, health screenings, and tuberculin testing, this really talks about the requirements for school entry. If you start to look at this, this language references what is required to actually start school. And we have had, a question that may come up here is what happens if a child does not meet these requirements. You know, they work very closely, families we've had in the past work very closely with the health department around being able to get these in a timely manner, to meet these requirements in a timely manner so students can start on time. So each family is handled individually. For the most part, it's not a problem to onboard students to meet these medical requirements. The next category that has significant change is how a student's medical care is handled at school. And this just goes through what the school personnel responding quickly and the need for emergency information cards. Those are all handled primarily digitally these days, and we have the necessary staff members at school, health department staff members, as well as MPS staff members. And it is important to note that nurses work for the health department. They are not actually Milford Public Schools employees. So I don't know if every board member knew that. The next category goes over the requirements for health assessments for students who play sports. And then it moves on into coaches monitoring a student's physical condition, being part of policy, emergency action plans required for sports events, individual sport students, as well as teams. And then as required by statute, mental health plans being developed for student athletes. And that guidance comes out of the State Department of Education on how to develop mental health plans for teams and individual student athletes. So those are all big changes that are highly regulated. We're happy to answer questions as we can. Are there any questions about that at this time, board members?
So I have a small list of housekeeping type of corrections that I'll just go through, and then board members can add to this if need be. So generally throughout actually all the policies, if we could make sure that the word district is always capitalized, it is in some places and isn't in others, and then to be sure that we use Milford Public Schools parentheses district the first time that it shows up in the policy. And similarly, I think there's some instances where the health department is referred to Milford Health Department, and sometimes it's just health department. So if we could maybe use Milford Health Department for each time, that would, just for consistency. And then on this particular policy, so on page 4 or 5, directly above the subheading, student medical care at school, you'll see the word, indicted, which I think should be indicated.
Yeah, that's true.
And then, on page 5 of 7, where it talks about coaches and, phys ed staff shall, it says ensure, it should be, I think, ensure.
Yep.
Then the sentence above the subheading, mental health plan for student athletes, protocols to be followed. There should be a comma after, cardiac or respiratory emergencies. And then, remove the space before the comma that's, in front of, I think it's after concussion. Traumatic brain injury or spinal cord injury should have a comma after it. And then the questioning, so it says, it says heat and cold related emergency. Should that be or heat or cold? I'm not sure if it should be or and, so that might be something to check on. And then this is a question that I think probably would have to be, looked at by the, legal counselor of the health department, but the last red sentence, on page 5 of 7, above regulations, it says that I'm wondering if the Board of Education is the correct recipient of the plan and the technical assistant, or should it say district? So it says the Connecticut State Department of Education shall make its plan available to boards of education and provide technical assistance to boards for the implementation of the plan.
Yeah, that's a good note. We'll check on that. Thank you.
Were there any other board members have questions or comments about this policy? Ms. Petrosky, you can help with this.
Ms. Wolf-Boynton?
Thank you. So I have a question about, on page 1 of 7, the full paragraph that's right above the subhead, health education. The paragraph begins, a member of the board will be a liaison. So that paragraph talks about how the same health services provided to public school students will be provided to private school students. And then at the very end, it mentions, again, the same responsibilities for provision of services and equipment now borne by the health department and board for public school students will be respectively borne for private school students. Can someone tell me, does that mean that we pay for the same health services in private schools in Milford? Or are we paying for Milford students who attend private schools outside of Milford?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do we pay who?
So,
So it says, go ahead, Ms. Wolf.
no, you go right ahead, Sue.
It mentions that, we have, who shares the responsibility for paying for certain things within the public school. But then it says, that the same responsibility for provisions of services and equipment now borne by the health department and the board for public school students will respectively be borne for private school students meeting the state requirements. So does that mean that does the board pay for those services and equipment that are carried out in a private school? And B, when you're talking about private school students, are those Milford students attending a private school in Milford, like St. Mary's, for instance, or is that Milford students attending a private school anywhere in the state?
Richard Telly, we don't pay for, nursing in other private schools, do we? I don't think I've ever really.
The Milford Health Department provides those services to private schools within the city of Milford. We do not pay for any services for students that are going outside of Milford except for special education services. If there's a student outplaced in another district or another another setting. But we do pay, the city does, we don't. Milford Public Schools doesn't pay for it. The city of Milford pays for those services for private schools in Milford.
Okay, so I'm just wondering if we are not involved, do these references to to private schools need to be in our policy?
I think the only time we're involved, which would be covered under multiple acts and laws, is when it's our student who's receiving special services. We would have to ask council if we could strike this paragraph. If the reference is a public act, I would be hesitant to strike language that council has not struck for us, but we can ask Ms. Wolf-Boynton.
I would
So
just,
maybe that's something that can be addressed when they, in August as well, when they're at our meeting actually, too.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Any other questions or comments?
You're on mute, Ms. Glennon. You're on mute.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Is that it? Any other questions?
I have one. It's a minor thing. On page 3 of 7, the first paragraph, that last sentence, I'm gonna read the last 2 lines of it. In accordance with applicable state and federal law, as well as board on policy 5125, student records confidentiality, should that "on" be taken out?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that was all I had. Anybody else? No? No other questions or comments?
Okay, so moving on to 5141.3. Again, falls under the category that it's highly, it came out of the health department, highly regulated. If you go to the second page, this is the bulk of the of changes here, where it identifies by whom regular health assessments can be conducted. These are the only 5 individuals that can conduct a health assessment for student entry to school. And then it outlines the health assessment must include the following items 1 through 5. It is divided by elementary and secondary. So you'll see that distinction made here in the policy as to what health assessments are required. How the health assessment is recorded is very specific. And then as the policy moves on, it breaks it down by screening. So you'll see the requirements for vision screening and what grade and what needs to be included in the screening and how it is documented. Very specific policy. You would almost think that this was an admin reg, but there are some policies, Ms. Glennon has actually said to the board before, that are so very specific because of legislation. So normally we would see this type of specificity in an admin reg, but the law is requiring that this is in policy, okay? You'll see then the breakdown of hearing screenings, what grades, what must be done, how it's documented. Moving on to postural screening, same thing. Moving on to tuberculin testing, same thing. And then the number of immunization requirements for young people to be enrolled in district public schools. Again, that is highly, that was changed last spring and it comes out of the new statute, all these requirements. And then this comes out of what occurred last spring as well, spring of 21, pardon me, the very limited basis for exemptions. This has been updated with that new language. We will need to keep these dates in for a little while because not all children have started school that may be meeting these exemptions. So you could read for yourself there under limited basis the changes made under 3 and the addition of 4. If you move to page 7, there is continued language about the limited basis exemption. But then it also goes into specifics on oral health assessments, again, at what age, what type, and how recorded. And then it talks about the failure to obtain the required health assessments immunization and the eligibility for free health assessments. Our health department is really good working with us. When we identify families who do not have access to medical care, they make sure that those young people do. And then there are some regulations that we'll need to write that are in addition to this, on how we handle the procedures and protocols internally on how to make sure this is implemented consistently in 14 schools. So there's a lot here to read. You probably have more questions for us on August 22nd, unless you've had time to read it since last Thursday, but are there any questions at this time?
Again, I have a small list of, most of them are housekeeping. So on page 4 of 10, where it's enumerated, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 1 doesn't make sense. I think maybe the word work in the first sentence is supposed to be world, Earth in a high-risk country of the world.
Yeah.
And then on number 2 and 3 is the phrase, since the previously required examination. It just seems out of place, and I'm wondering if I think maybe just putting a comma before it might help with its meaning. Travel to a high-risk country, staying at least 1 week with substantial contact with the indigenous population, comma, since the previously required examination.
Okay.
I think the intent is that since the previous examination, if some of these things happen, then something is triggered, so. But it just, the phrase seems out of place.
I think I would agree. Ms. Griffin can look at it.
And then at the end, the immunization requirements, no student shall be allowed to enroll in the district without, it says vaccination, adequate immunization. I think maybe the word vaccination meant to be stricken. And just say adequate immunization.
Yep.
And then, lastly, understanding that the wording is in the statute on page 5 of 10, number 3, and all the notes. The notes go on to, the notes on page 6 and 7 talk about the honor before April 28th. In some places it says by midnight, April 27th. In other places it says there must be enrollment before midnight on April 28th. I sent these to Ms. Griffin. I would feel more comfortable if somebody could just go through and make sure that it's correct. And if I think there might be some, a couple of times when there's some inconsistencies with the way it's written, so.
Now Ms. Dugas look at it from a legal perspective.
Okay, and then on page 7, the note on page 7, it says, let's see, the first line, it says, in the situation regarding the religious exemption, a child is considered enrolled, blah, blah, blah. It says, as a parent, guardian provides documentation. I'm wondering if that should say, if a parent provides documentation.
Yep, sounds right.
Ms. Griffin has this list as well. So, Ms. Petrosky, can you facilitate if there's any other questions or comments about this policy?
Are there any other questions or
Please.
comments?
Thank you.
Mr. Fowler?
Thank you, Ms. Petrosky. Regarding the April 28th, 2021, that's going to be consistent for in perpetuity, right? Correct? In that note, that's, and just a few other housekeeping notes. In the first paragraph, I think on page 2 of 10, there were, I think, 3 including clauses, and it's one long sentence. I'm wondering if we can just clean that up or break it up. And then, and I was wondering if the notes should be italicized, because when you scroll down, I think this is page 5 of 10, you go from, sorry, again, it's talking about even if the student transfers to another school in Connecticut and then it goes to the note, it looks like, I don't know, it just doesn't look clean, so I was wondering if the notes should be italicized, because they're a little, they're different. Anyway, those are just some comments.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? No more comments or questions? Mrs. Glennon, we can move on.
Okay, thank you. Last policy, Dr. Kutaya.
Yep, I'm gonna turn things over to Dr. Pettigan.
Thank you, Dr. Pataya. Good evening, members of the board. Tonight, I'm happy to share with you policy 6142.10. It's the Health Education Program Policy. In addition to the policies that Dr. Pataya has already shared with us tonight, as the title of this policy suggests, this really has more to do with how we educate children, because we know that in order for children to meet their learning goals, while they're here with us in Milford Public Schools, and to have healthy outcomes even beyond academics after, the health education piece is really critical. This entire policy is in red because it is an entirely new policy. It is a required policy, and then there are some pieces of this also that are relegated to what we need to consider to be legally compliant. So the same members who reviewed the earlier policies that were reviewed also took a look at this policy. Again, this policy starts with more of a kind of belief statement of the Board of Education in the beginning, recognizing that as a primary mission of our school system to educate children, we have to ensure that they are also health literate. That's an important piece of their overall education. That our program is in fact developed with by cooperation with staff and members of the health professional community, of course state and local agency representatives, and then of course adopted by the board. And there is new curriculum and new material coming from the Connecticut State Department of Education just a couple of weeks ago in this spring that we've worked and will continue to work to adopt into our newly revised curriculum as we move forward. The input of students is encouraged to the curriculum, and it's guided by the following goals, and you can see them enumerated here. What's important to recognize also with our work in Milford Public Schools is this is certainly in line with our district goals and our vision of the learner, especially when we think about the piece on personal development. Moving down into the policy, after those 4 goals are listed, there's an indication of the number of minutes, the minimum number of minutes that students need to have afforded to them for physical movement and exercise, and also for their daily lunch program. And we're of course happy to share that we of course have, we're meeting those minimum number of minutes and then some. There's also an exception that's noted there, that there may be a case where we're required to alter those numbers for physical movement and lunch by the planning and placement team, the special education process. The school health program, of course, is designed to ensure that we have a healthy and safe school environment. That number 2 bullet at the end of page 1 is referring to the curriculum, the age-appropriate health education curriculum that's referenced, and again, there was a framework that was just released in this spring that we will implement as we revise our curriculum moving forward. It's further enumerated to talk about food services and food service activities, so we're very grateful in our district for our partnership with our food services department, our school health services that are able to, in each of the health offices and school nurses, partner with the individuals that provide health education and instruction to our students. We're ahead of the curve in Milford because of bringing on the counselors, inclusive of at the elementary level, and that's obviously a stretch for school systems across the state of Connecticut to think about health education at the elementary level. That's kind of a new, and I would say improved feature for us in our public schools. And of course there's integrated family and community involvement activities that are really designed to help families know how to best keep their children healthy from beyond the school at the home front. There is of course a provision in this policy that students should never have any kind of physical activity or participation from what's outlined here withheld from them because of a disciplinary consequence. So of course we would not have that happening in Milford Public Schools. And we're always encouraging our students to make healthy food choices. I know firsthand as a parent that our school staff does that throughout our cafeterias in the school system, where students are really encouraged to take each of the food items that has them having a full plate, but also each of the food, I guess parts of the food pyramid are covered there. Food and beverages that are sold or served in our schools are always nutritious, low fat foods and drinks, and you can see a listing there, and I know that Mrs. Fausich works diligently to ensure that this is the case in each of our school lunchrooms. Then it just closes saying that, of course, we will develop an administrative regulation as needed for the implementation of this policy. And I'm happy to take any questions if the board has any.
Any questions, comments? Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question about the 20 minutes of, I guess it's recess time. I mean, it's not how it's referred to, but I know that's statutorily required for us. Do you think that that's meeting the needs of our elementary school students in our district?
Well, as I mentioned, we're required, and as you just indicated, by law to have the statutory 20 minutes, but certainly our students have much more access to movement and play. Part of Dr. Kutaya's presentation included how we're opening up our kindergarten experiences across the board with intentional play, but there are really opportunities throughout the grades for students to be up and moving much more than the 20 minutes that are allowed. Inclusive of in the middle school, I don't know if you're aware, students go out after their lunchtime for a small break where they can have additional physical exercise and movement. There are many times also where teachers will take classes outside as a part of their school day and have movement throughout the building. So I think we recognize that the 20 minutes, while it's statutorily required, it's a long school day. And it's healthy to have kids up and moving, and it shouldn't be just during recess and physical education class, that it's throughout their school day.
So you would say yes?
I would say yes, this is a minimum requirement, but there are multiple opportunities, and I want to be clear about that we're integrating the movement while children are learning. So it's not that we're going out for 20 minutes of recess and then, multiple times, right? Our staff is finding creative ways as we revise curriculum and as we think about our model for high quality instruction to infuse movement, play and movement and physical activity throughout the day at all grade levels.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? No other comments?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're happy to revisit those policies at the end of August, and Ms. Glennon, always questions ahead of time are very helpful for our team to be able to process them before we get to the meeting, okay?
Yes.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the HR report. Ms. Papazna?
Thank you. This month in my report, you have the open jobs, the postings, personnel recommendations, retirements, resignations, terminations, and stipend appointments. I want to point out a couple things. First of all, you may have noticed on the job postings, we do have a school nurse posted. And as Dr. Kutaya said, that is, our nurses are employed by the city, but we do post their positions for them when asked, just as a courtesy. We don't accept applications, we route them all back to the city, but that's why that is posted there. I also wanted to update you on our final tally for the number of teacher retirements. We ended up at 16, which is slightly less than our average. But we also had 15 resignations throughout the year. And so far, the good news is this year we've hired 12 new teacher hires. So we have 12 new teachers coming on board so far, and we are still looking for quite a few. I would say about 17 to 20, all throughout the district that we're busy looking for right now.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Wolf-Boyden?
Ms. Capazzo. I have one question about a resignation. Noticed that we had a cybersecurity and forensic specialist resign, and that a couple of months ago, we had gotten together and talked about the importance of longevity in that department. And I was just wondering whether that resignation had anything to do with challenges that the board might be able to help you with.
Okay, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, our cyber and security gentleman, he just left last week for greener pastures. As you probably can imagine, it's a hugely popular, everyone's looking for one of these positions. So my guess is we gave him a little bit of experience, and his resume, grew, and he was desirable elsewhere. Lewis and I have posted the position, but we are looking at the salary to see if that's something we might need to massage. But thank you for asking. I think right now we're kind of just exploring to see what's out there, to see if anyone applies.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a really hot position right now, right?
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Any other questions or comments? There are no other questions or comments.
Very
Thank
good,
you,
thank
Board.
you.
So the next three items, the end of year financials, the 21-22 proposed budget transfers, which we'll need the board to vote on, and the disbursement report, I'm gonna turn all three of those over to Mr. Riccitelli.
Thank you, Dr. Kataya, Mrs. Glennon, members of the board. In your package, you have two documents, well, three if you include the disbursements report, but the end of year financial report is the usual quarterly report that you see for the fourth quarter, which covers the last quarter of the year, so it's for the full year. On that report, you can see and under the available balance line, any of those items that are there, they're either pluses or they're minuses. And then you will correspondingly see them on the proposed final budget transfers. So if it's okay with the board, I'll forego talking about the quarterly report itself and refer right to the budget transfers. I should say that at this meeting, we come before you to ask for these transfers because we have to balance the books. Obviously, everything has to tie out, and these are the transfers that we need to cover the amounts that were in deficit and and where those dollar amounts can come from. So I'll just go through the list quickly. I have given an explanation on the form, so I'm sure that you've taken a look at those, but I'll just go through each one quickly, and then of course answer any questions that you have. So where we're taking the money from, where there was a surplus in an account, under workers' compensation 2003, approximately 43,600, and that was due to we negotiated a new rate after the budget was set last year, and we were able to get better rates because of our robust risk management plan that we have in place and the experience, which is continuing to trend in the right direction. Unemployment compensation, there was very little, let's see. Oh, yeah, obviously. Unemployment, there was very little unemployment. As you know, we actually had a labor shortage, so there were very few people that were on unemployment, and thus the surplus in that account. Transportation and field trips, although we resumed field trips in March, for a good part of the year, there were no field trips, thus the surplus in that account. Telecommunications, we received an E-rate reimbursement. I think we've talked about E-rate reimbursement, or the E-rate program, where we get reimbursement from the federal government for certain IT and telecommunications costs that we have. And the E-rate reimbursement was for a previous fiscal year, but it didn't come in until this year. So we still have to book that dollar amount, and that shows up as a surplus in that particular line item. For the next three, these are tuition accounts for ECA, the Education Center for the Arts, which is an ACES magnet school, Trumbull VOAG, and Bridgeport magnet schools. All of these, we budgeted for the typical amount of students that are either allowed in the program or typically go into the program. And because of the pandemic, we believe that because of the pandemic, more students decided to stay in Milford Public Schools rather than risk going into either New Haven or Bridgeport. And so the number of students was down at each of those programs, and thus we didn't have to pay as much tuition for them. We anticipate that the numbers will go back up again, but it may take a year or two to backfill, as some students were not in this year. Now we would start again with freshmen coming in, so it may take a couple of years to get those schools' programs back up to the enrollment that we've seen in the past. With the exception of the Bridgeport magnet schools, we've seen a consistent decrease in the number of Milford students that are going to Fairchild Wheeler and the Discovery Magnet School in Bridgeport. That trend is going to continue. We saw the report for next year of number of students that have enrolled, and the number continues to go down. So I'm not making any judgments. It's just it's a fact that the enrollment at those two schools continues to decrease, which means less money we have to put out for tuition. Non-instructional supplies, a very small amount that we didn't spend in that account, and same thing with student activities, a small amount, and it was really just because of canceled or curtailed activities because of COVID restrictions. So all in all, a total for this budget transfer of $253,138.57, and then on the next page where we need to cover accounts that were in deficit. So we would transfer $5,000 to homebound tutoring, and that deficit was due to an increased number of students that required homebound tutoring for various reasons throughout this year. Retirements, as Mrs. Kapazna said, we had 16 teacher retirements. We normally budget for 18, so we had slightly less there. But we had a significant number of custodians, maintenance employees, secretaries, and paraeducators who retired this year. And the main reason is because of health insurance changes in the contract. We've talked to the board when you've ratified the contracts that we're moving employees off of the traditional PPOs and into the HDHP programs. And this year in the custodians, secretaries, and para contracts, they either had to had to go to the HDHP, or they would have to pay the difference of the cost between the two, which is extremely expensive. And so rather than do that, some of the employees, at least this is the majority of the employees that we know of that retired, they were of age and they didn't want to change their health insurance, so they chose to retire. So under their contracts, they do have certain severances, and so we had a shortage in that account, even though we had 2 less teachers than we normally budget for. We anticipate that will level off as new contracts take effect and regular employees start on a regular path with their current benefits. Negotiations, we went over in the amount of money that we had budgeted for in the legal accounts. We call it negotiation services. That's just what the title has been for many years, but it's really legal services. And that is due to the increased number of cases, both involving special education, expulsions, and residency, where legal intervention was required this past year. And I think some of that probably can be tied back also to the pandemic and some of the situations that we're seeing with that. And lastly, hopefully this is the last time we're gonna have to talk about deficits in the utilities. This is the total deficit for utilities this year was $343,169, but you transferred another amount previously. So in this, to close out the books, we need an additional $135,622 in natural gas. We are now locked in on natural gas and electricity moving forward, so we believe that we've budgeted properly in the 22-23 budget, and hopefully the economy altogether will start to regulate too, and gas prices will come down, and we'll all be happier. So anyway, that is the amount of the transfers to both from and to, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions or comments? No questions or comments? I have actually one.
Sure.
For the E-rate reimbursement, is that something that you have an idea of how much that will be from year to year?
No, not always.
Okay.
We have to apply each year with what we think we're going to spend and what is reimbursable. And then based on how much money is in the total pot for E-rate reimbursements, we get a certain percentage, and we never really know what the percentage is going to be until it's actually awarded.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think
You
that's
have a
it.
motion, Ms. Petrowski?
Make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the 2021-22 budget transfers as recommended by administration.
I second.
Second. Mr. Fowler has seconded. Do we have any further discussion on the motion? Is there any further discussion, Ms. Petrowski, that you can see there?
No.
Okay. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Griffin?
Yes. Adam DeYoung, Catherine Ailing.
Yes.
Adam DeYoung,
Yes.
Megan Doyle,
Yes.
Andrew Fowler,
Yes.
Tracy Irby,
Yes.
Emily McDonough Souza,
Yes.
Una Petrowski,
Yes.
Betsy Ratner,
Yes,
Cindy Wolf Boynton,
Yes.
and Susan Glennon.
Yes.
10 yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lastly, in your package is a listing of all of the cash disbursements for the month of June over the amount of $1,500, with only one item attributable to COVID, which is highlighted in yellow. And I don't believe that we have, or there may be one that has an asterisk, which is due to the flood damage at Harborside Middle School. And that also is coming to an end. We're just about complete, we've just about settled everything, and our insurance company will cover all of those expenses. But anyway, with that, you have a listing of those disbursements, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? Mr. Fowler?
Thank you, Ms. Petrowski. Mr. Riccitelli, are we gonna be continuing to pay for the trailers come the upcoming school year?
We have been in the last 2 weeks and continuing this week emptying trailers.
Okay.
So we were in the process now of bringing what's usable back into the schools, cleaning it and deploying it to the classrooms. There are some things that are just not salvageable, so those are inventoried and will be disposed of in accordance with our disposal policies. But there are some things that we want to retain in storage, so there will be some trailers that are left, but vastly decreased in the number.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Doyle?
On page 45 of the packet, there's a line, 20, the second one after the yellow. It says Connecticut Business Systems, Smart Board, St. Mary's.
Yes.
What is that?
Sure. Well, this is the grants, reimbursements, and so under our federal grants, Milford Public Schools is the pass-through for the private schools. Private schools are entitled to some of the grants that the federal government has, and so that's what this is. It's a pass-through, so we have to order it. It gets sent to St. Mary's and then, or Laurelton Hall, or any of the private schools that are in Milford. And then we pay the bill with the grant money from the federal government.
And those numbers are given to us. We don't get to choose how much everybody gets, they're given to us.
Correct.
Any other questions or comments? No other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Riccitelli. Thank you, Dr. Kutaya. We move on to the consent agenda. Ms. Petrosky, do you have a motion?
I do. I make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves consent agenda items, consideration of minutes, June 13th, 2022 business meeting, June 13th, 2022 special meeting, June 28th, 2022 special meeting, and June 28th, 2022 residency hearing.
Second?
I second.
Mr. Fowler seconds. Ms. Griffin, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Ailing.
Yes.
Adam DeYoung.
Yes.
Megan Doyle.
Yes.
Andrew Fowler.
Yes.
Tracy Irby.
Yes.
Emily McDonough Souza.
Yes.
Una Petrosky.
Yes.
Betsy Ratner.
Yes.
Cindy Wolf Boynton.
Yes.
And Susan Glennon.
Yes.
10 yeses.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Okay, we move on to board comment. Do we have any board comment this evening? Ms.
There's
Petrosky,
no board
calling
comment.
people.
There is no board comment.
All right. Ms. Petrosky, do you have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I second.
Are there any objections to adjourning at 8:32? Seeing none, we will be adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good few weeks until we see each other again.